Hello, I'm Robert, and this time I'm going to talk about the two cases of Covid-19, the two strains. So actually, they're not really very different strains at all. And Dr. Mike Ryan, he gave this chap here, he gave the example of a model of car with two different number plates. So if you change the number plate on a car, then it really doesn't change anything essential in how it moves around and what you can do with it. All it changes is a series of letters and numbers on the front of the car, and it's very much like that with this virus. It makes all the same proteins, it does all the same things, it just has a slightly different sequence of the genetic code that makes it up. And apparently, I never knew that, but apparently the genetic code in the COVID virus, whenever someone gets it, then by the time it's gone through the respiratory tract and all that replicating, it's made on average 6 minor mutations. So even though it's got all this error correction and everything, there's certain mutations it doesn't mind. It doesn't care what they are. So there's these little minor mutations going on all the time. The gene is the whole genome is fast for something like this. And there's little genetic changes going on all the time. And so I've got a quote here where it said, every time the virus replicates a new person's respiratory tract, that's my paraphrase, half a dozen minute genetic mutations happen. But many of them won't change the way the virus works. They talk about it creating the same proteins. And then there's an expert saying, in all practical terms, the virus is as it was when it originally emerged. There's no evidence that it is getting any worse. And that's in New Scientist saying that. And then here's an expert reaction. It just says it's difficult to confirm studies. What they seem to be saying, and then you summarize what they're saying. So what they seem to be saying is that they have two lineages of this, and they think that they speculate that the new lineage is more aggressive, is more affected. The new lineage was more prevalent for a while, and it was actually better adapted, less harmful to humans, and was spreading around. But they now. Oh no, they think the new lineage was for some reason more pathogenic and was more affected by human intervention because there were more people who were dying of this new lineage, they speculate. And then, so as a result of all the interventions, then this one was selectively removed. Which isn't, I'm not very convinced by that as an idea. But the thing is, there was absolutely zero evidence for it. Nothing at all. Not even slightest bit of evidence. And they're just speculative, someone running a vague speculation. And so and the WHO say there's no evidence for any change in lethality or transmissibility. And he explains up here that we know that they talk about earlier clades in the phylogenetic analysis. And a clade means things that look almost exactly the same, but a clade means they sort of group together, and you can say that although they're slightly different from each other, they're the same thing, they're the same clade, same group of little cases that are very similar. And they think that the earlier clades look a little bit different than the more recent clades. You only look at 103 gene sequences, and they say that there's no known association with these sequences that are changing with severity. So WHO says there's no basis for this at all. And they encourage countries to make their sequences available for more analysis. They say, but this virus is very stable based on all the sequences we've seen so far. So the sequences just not changing in any essential way. And then Dr. Mike Ryan, he talks about how with the Ebola, then these little changes in the genes are very useful for seeing where it's spreading to and from. So you can tell, if you're not able to do all the contact tracing, you can figure out from the genes that, oh, this one must have come from that one somehow, even though we can't quite figure out how it got here. And then, so it's also useful to do all this for developing a vaccine. You need to base the vaccine on a strain that is as close as possible to a circulating virus. And he says this data has been publicly available for weeks, so there's no new data here. And just researchers looking at it, and he said it's like they found two cars exactly the same make, but with license plates a bit different in a different car. Is it a different car? The answer is it's a slightly different signature, but fundamentally it's the same virus. That's a wonderful thing about a publicly available database, that anyone can analyse it. So this is just open for anyone to analyse, and theoreticians all around the world can come to it and they can say all sorts of different things. They can just make stuff up, and they often do. So the general public tend to think of these papers as being like someone has come to a final answer. They're like Spock, and they just look at this, they do a little experiment, say, and then they can see everything. They just like an all-seeing eye. They're like Spock, and they just look at something on the screen. They say, "Ah, yes, that is a, I don't know, it is an intelligent cloud or something." And he just knows just by looking at it. Anyway, it's not like that, and so it's a dialogue. And they sometimes it's more like sort of even the highest, even like the equivalent of nature, most difficult for most people to get into. But if you're a distinguished academic, then you're kind of chatting with other academics, even in nature, and it's basically coffee table conversation, but with lots of footnotes, and it's not always completely established. Indeed, most of the time it isn't. And then you have the review papers, and you have the very thorough papers, you have the landmark papers, groundwork papers, then you have the opinion pieces and things, and then you have these ordinary papers with very speculative little sentences in them, and everybody looks at it and knows there's just a speculation by the researcher, there's no basis for it. And this one wasn't even published yet, it's just a preprint that is going through the process of being published. But it had headlines around the world with, Covid-19, there are two versions, and the other version is deadly, and you're really going to be in huge trouble if you get the version 1, or you get the version 2. But luckily, version 1 is spreading, and it's not nearly so deadly, and so, but you've got to watch out, because if you get version 2, you'll be in an awful state. And this is just not based on anything. There's zero evidence for any of that. So, and so that's the WHO say it, that there's no zero evidence, it's expert reaction, and these authors themselves just haven't come up with anything conclusive. And then there's the New Scientist, you bring up the New Scientist article, and there we go. There do appear to be two different strains. It might be more aggressive. We have no idea yet how these underlying genetic changes relate to disease severity. So, and the other chapter saying it's just normal for them to do that. Ebola doing it all the time. They're not saying that the Ebola one is for, I'm going back to what my client said. And any vaccine will need to target, so it's very useful to split out these two strains, because any vaccine will need to target features that are found in both strains. And then Jones, who is the where is he? Let's search for Jones. He's a researcher. Jones at the University of Reading in the UK. He says the difference between the two identified strains are tiny. In fact, they can't really be considered to be separate strains. and many of the genetic differences won't affect the production of proteins, and so won't change the way the virus works or the symptoms it causes. And one is not more deadly than the other. In all practical terms, the virus is as it was when it originally emerged, says Jones. And then there's no evidence it's getting any worse. And the same sentiment is echoed by the World Health Organization, as we just said. It's only suggests there's some genetic diversity of the virus, but it's very common. That's the same with Ebola, and it doesn't mean it's changing, a representative of the WHO told the New Scientist. So please just bear in mind there's no sort of hype about nothing here. Really, it's nothing. As you said, it's interesting for vaccines. They need to make sure the vaccine will target all the different varieties that are currently moving around. And it might be that some of them, it might be that you need to have some consideration to make sure that works. And that's about it. I'm just interested in tracing it and finding out where it gets from A to B, and you say, oh well, this must have got to the UK from Italy via China because that's how the gene sequence goes, or something like that. That'd be especially useful if you've got community transmission, because you'll be able to have some idea. If you can't figure out where it came from, well, you might at least be able to figure out it came from Italy, say. And then you say, oh, that's the Italian virus, and we found it in Canada, say. So who has been between Italy and Canada who has had any contact with the contact that I'm trying to trace back to Italy? I try to trace back out of Canada. So it can be very useful for that sort of a thing. And that he was saying it's very useful for Ebola for tracing back and forth. Anyway, I hope this helps. Please don't be afraid of this. There's nothing to be worried about here. It's just the same virus, and SARS went through only one significant change in all of the time, and the only change in SARS actually made it less infectious of human beings. And it was just a random change, and this one happened to take off, and it made it less infectious. And this, in case of COVID-19, if I understand the WHO right, this is not a significant change at all. Basically, it hasn't changed, or it's changed in these minor little ways that just sort of like having a freckle in a different place or something, or like having a number plate in which you've got just a slightly different number on your car, and otherwise it's exactly the same car. And that's all that's happened here. So I just remind you, do subscribe if you want to watch more videos like this. Remember our Doomsday Debunk Facebook group that you can, and do join us if you want to help people who are scared as well, and do fact checking. Now when we do our fact checking, then we are very careful to look at high quality sources and try and find you the best sources. So on this particular matter, then as I talked in another one, I think, these various epidemiologists and so on who have a certain amount of expertise, but to my mind, evaluating and looking around who's most expert on this, the WHO are the absolute tops. They stop over 200 diseases a year, and all sorts of exotic diseases in the tropics and so on, and emerging new diseases. They're involved in this all the time. Their entire working life is to do with stopping diseases. And then you get other people who look at this in a much more academic way, and they have done models of epidemics, and they model what is happening, but they don't take account of the new containment measures, which are very innovative. They might, for instance, they do all sorts of things like that. And given the choice between one of those and the WHO, then on this particular matter of stopping an infectious disease, then I think you start with the WHO. They are by far the most authoritative, reliable people in the world on this particular matter of fighting infectious diseases, and especially novel, newly emerging infectious diseases. They do that all the time. So that is why I focus. So I get people criticizing me and saying, oh, why are you so optimistic? You're not saying what the media say. You're not saying what the latest pundit said, who said that 80% of the world is going to get infected. The reason is because I'm saying what the WHO say, or at least I'm doing my very best to say what the WHO say. If I get anything wrong, please tell me if I've misunderstood something they've said, or if I've done something wrong in my attempt to summarise them. And that is the only thing I'm trying to do with these debugs. And then little asides to kind of illustrate and help you understand what's going on. Anyway, maybe see some of you in the group. Be sure to read the rules at the head of the group if you join us. And do subscribe to this channel if you want to watch more of these.